Hello everyone, Damien here from Cork Audio, and today I wanted to do a video follow-up review of a component that I actually did a written review of a few months back, and that is the C312 Preamplifier from Gilbert, Yeung. Now, I want to say a couple things right off the bat since this is technically a review. I want to say that while I am making this video review, it is not unbiased. As of this year, I've actually been working with Angela Gilbert Yeung and started selling her components. And I wanted to say that, I have a stake in this, and I also wanted to say this was the component that changed it for me. My full-time job before starting to work with Angela Gilbert Yeung was as a high-end audio technician, and I still offer those services, and you can find them on my website. But I had the opportunity about 6 to 8 months ago to review this component. I had been watching Angela Gilbert Yeung's work across the multiple Facebook groups over the past few months, and I was really interested in the design and the build principles of it. And of course, the best way besides just seeing photos online is to hear it in person. So Angela gave me the opportunity to listen to this C312 preamplifier with the optional SP36 capacitor pack upgrade. And as I said, I did a written review. I'll leave that link down in the description below if you are a person who prefers to read. So as I said, this will not be an unbiased review because I do sell Angela Gilbert Yeung components, but my written review was technically unbiased because it was my first impressions of it. Now that I've had almost a year with this unit, I feel that I can really get into depth about what its capabilities are and how it really can fit into essentially any system. So let's get straight into it. So here we are, up close and personal with the C312 preamplifier, and before I get too much into the sound of the unit, I wanted to talk a bit on aesthetics of it. As you can see, it's kind of difficult to actually take photos of or really give descriptions of because it's very reflective. It actually has, the production models have an acrylic face plate that is very reflective, so you can probably see me actually in the faceplate. So it's kind of hard to see all of the details without actually having this in person. I will say that pictures do not do it justice. So we have the nice black acrylic front faceplate here that is reflective. All of the actual text has been done in a almost gold glitter. It's really nice text that I'm not sure exactly how he does it. But on the C312, we actually have a base layer of red acrylic as well. And that's kind of difficult to pick up, except if you really look into the center here around the glowing blue circle. You can see a little bit of that red coming through. And I think that's a really nice aesthetic touch to it. Of course, the preamp and the capacitor pack here have the blue circle here in the center, and I really love the color of it. It is a nice, cool blue that's not going to be too piercing into your room. So if you're actually listening to this at night, you have all the lights turned down low, this is just going to be a nice ambience to the room compared to something that's really going to pull away from the listening experience. So that's a really nice touch as well. Something else that I've really loved about Gilbert Yeung's designs is she always likes to put little symbolism throughout to either tell you what it is or what's inside of it, just kind of like a, I don't know, just some descriptive symbolism. So for instance, we have the SP36 capacitor pack here, which is an upgrade for this preamplifier, and I'll get further into that later. But we have the schematic symbols for capacitors on each side here, and we also have it as well here on the front face plate of the C312, and over here is the symbol for pretty close to a transistor, so it's just a cool feature as it is. We have two large knobs here that are painted over, so they got a nice texture to them, though this one actually has on the volume knob a remote control to actually control that. You can get a different feature if you wanted to actually be able to control each one of the sound knobs with a control, but as I said, that is something separate. So, getting directly into the sound of it now, we'll start over here with the sources. One of the biggest components of having a really good audio system is the build quality of your components. I mean, that seems too simple to say, but quite honestly, that's where a lot of your performance is made or lost in mass-produced audio. So this is actually something that you don't see that often in new equipment, and that is completely mechanical switches. This input selector here, you have two balanced and a single-ended input. This is actually a double pole rotary switch. That means that you actually have 2 points of contact for every channel of your source coming in. So that reduces the resistance and, of course, adds to the actual contact area to ensure that you don't have any loss of signal, and it also increases your longevity. So you have your two balanced inputs, and then you go over to here to single-ended, and you will be able to choose between your three single-ended units here. And since they're all mechanical switches, if you had source 1, you would turn source 1 on and make sure your other one's on or off, and same goes for 2 or 3. This will also make sure that you don't have any type of interaction between different sources. For instance, if you had something that was putting off some noise, such as maybe a DAC or something that wasn't filtered so well, you're not going to have any of that interaction or noise be amplified through the preamplifier. And then we get into the actual fun portion of it, and that is the three controls that help you completely change the personality of your system. Most power amplifiers are meant to be neutral. They're just supposed to pair well with the actual speakers, and then not many of them actually have any type of flavor or personality unless you're building a system around a tube amp or something along those lines. But I actually have the Infinity Quantum Line Source 1s, which are notoriously difficult to drive, so it's actually more difficult to find an amplifier that will pair with the speakers. And one of the issues that I've actually had with the QLS is not everything sounds great with it. The woofers love a high damping factor, but if the damping factor is too high, sometimes it can actually be a bit fatiguing. So the preamp has always kind of been something that has made a major difference in my system. And the C312 has been nothing but transformational because it allows you to change it anywhere from a tube-based preamplifier with a tube simulator circuit or just a complete solid state. So you have your three controls here: warm, tube simulator, and solid state. And when you start off listening and experimenting with the C312, you want to just have everything at kind of the 9 o'clock position. That's technically around the default sound signature that for the C312. Now, one thing that you'd have to keep in mind is that these are all individual gain stages as well, so they have to be used in tandem. If you turn up the warm a little bit, it will be a warmer sound, but the gain will also go up as well. So if you want to build on that warm sound, you could turn down on the solid state a little bit, and then you would have the same gain level. And the other benefit that allows for is this creates synergy. Whenever you're buying something, especially a preamplifier, not many of them actually have any type of features where you can change the sound. If you like it, you do. If you don't, there's not much you could do about it unless you actually have something like a tube preamplifier where you can roll a tube or something to change that sound. And there's tons of audiophiles out there trying all manner of things to adjust their preamplifiers, including I've seen a lot lately to do with op amps, and sometimes that's just rolling the dice if it's going to work and if it's actually going to sound good, where this has been completely thought out over years by Gilbert Yeung, and it absolutely works. So it creates synergy in a system. It's not something that you sit down and you decide that you don't like it. You can get up and literally change it to whatever you want it to be. So regardless of the source that I've used or the outputs that I've used, it also allows you to adjust it to whatever gain level that you need it to be set at. So one issue that I have is the NAD has a high input sensitivity. It only takes maybe 1.5 volts to get rated wattage out of this, which is upwards of 1,000 watts into 2 ohms. So that can take off really quick, and that's one of the only things that I've really not liked about the NAD. And this allows me to actually control that. I probably have close to a volt or more coming from my DAC, so that's pretty much close already to the max output of the amplifier. This will actually allow you to adjust that gain level so that you have proper levels of control over the volume and not have any type of distortion from overdriving any certain component in your system. Everything here, the preamp allows you to, it's the control center of your entire system. So that's another thing that I've really loved, is you being able to control that gain aspect. So I've been able to try this with all manner of equipment thanks to what I do. I'm a full-time technician, so I've had the opportunity to try this with, well, here is my reference DAC. This is a Keese's DA151 MK2. It's an older DAC, but is still considered a legendary DAC. I actually have the MK1 in the office. They are very rare to find because most people still have them in use because they sound so fantastic. But I know that not many people or audiophiles will consider that, so I've also tried it against other sources. For instance, I have an Audio GD R1 DAC up above me, and I've also tried this with a Audio GD R7HE, which is around $5,000 to $6,000 MSRP, which about matches with the Gilbert Yeung C312 without the capacitor pack upgrade. I've also been able to try this with a number of power amplifiers from Class AB, Class D, including some newer topographies with gallium nitride, tube amplifiers, you name it. I've always been able to find the perfect synergistic match with the C312. And there is no wrong position for these. It's just, you start off at the 9 o'clock range and then you just start experimenting. So I usually started off with the warm, saw what that did with the sound, tried with the tube simulator circuit, and then same with the solid state. And you can just move them independently or in tandem to find whatever preference of sound that you have. And the way that I found that is just experimenting until I found myself sitting in my listening position for over an hour, realizing I hadn't moved because it just enveloped me into it. And that's exactly what the C312 does. And essentially any Gilbert Yeung component. Like I had noted earlier, this is the actual preamp and component that changed my my worldviews on the high-end audio and what is capable or what a component should do. Because I've even listened to friend systems that have, I won't get too far into bashing or anything. I don't want to bash any brands that are doing things right or wrong, but I've compared preamplifiers that are in the same price range that are mass produced, and this just blows them out of the water. From detail retrieval, but mostly just the emotional connection. I know that's something that a lot of people try to talk about nowadays and try to actually describe, and it's something hard to describe. It's something that it's an experience. It's something that you have to listen in person to actually understand, and that's something with high-end audio in itself. But this is something different. There's been nothing like this preamp or Gilbert Yeung's work that has really made everything else disappear where it does not matter. There's a lot of gear that I've tried over the years that I've repaired, modified, or worked on, and it's just, sometimes it's not necessarily better, it's just different. This wholeheartedly, I could say, is better because it has perfect clarity of signal, and it just creates such an immense sound stage that is even increased by the capacitor pack, and I'll get to that here in a moment. So, I briefly talked about the SP36 capacitor pack here. This is a upgrade for the C312. So when I first started doing my review of the C312, I did it just as it was by itself without this plugged in. And then after a while of finding my sweet spot, I just kind of left this in the position of where I kind of liked the sound, which is pretty much about warm on 10, tube on about 10, and then solid state I would leave at about 9 o'clock. Now, if I had something that was a little bit sweeter on the bottom end, such as a tube amplifier, I would actually turn down the tube a little bit and turn the solid state up. But after I found the position where I was most happy and where I did most of my listening, this is where I started experimenting with the SP36. So, quite simply, what the capacitor pack is a pack of capacitors that greatly increases the internal capacitance of whatever it is hooked to. So the SP series is mostly used for input sections, such as a preamplifier. There's actually some preamplifiers, including some older blue circle designs, that can now be upgraded with one of the SP jacks with a SP capacitor pack. This one is the CP36, which is the highest range current of the SP. This is 3.6 farads of capacitive energy. Now, for reference, even with this NAD power amplifier that can put out 1,000 watts into 2 ohms, it probably has maybe somewhere around 500,000 to 750,000 microfarads. It might not even be close to 1 farad of total capacitive energy for even a big power amp, where this is 3.6 farads of capacitance that is being plugged into the preamplifier. Now, I will admit, when I first started getting into this is one of the biggest things I wanted to try, because I wasn't sure exactly what it would do to the sound. There's a lot of people that say or think, well, how could it make a big difference? It makes a huge difference. This is probably my favorite modification or upgrade for any component is these capacitor packs. And one of the reasons why is because it's immediately AB capable. You can AB back and forth to see what it does for your system. There's a lot of mods and tweaks out there that you buy it from the manufacturer, you listen to it for a little bit, and you might not like what you hear. You talk to the manufacturer and they tell you, well, you got to listen to it for 500 hours. Sure, it is a capacitor pack, so it's going to take some time after it's built to be fully burned in and to have the full effect. But it is still extremely noticeable that even right off the bat, after it's been built and you first test it on your system, it's immediately noticeable what it does for you in the sound. Since it is 3.6 farads of energy, you can disconnect the SP jack. So here it is actually. And then you could actually leave this for 3 to 5 minutes and listen to a song or two, hear what the difference is. And then as long as this has not been discharged too much, you can reach right back and plug it into the back of the preamp. And just like that, it'll start to charge back up and you can hear that difference. So I actually had a friend over at one point, and that was something that we were experimenting back and forth with. I like just doing some A/B testing with friends and not exactly telling them what it is that I'm doing, because, you know, it is my reference system. It's something that I'm very familiar with, but it's also something that you get very used to. So if you're doing a lot of testing, it's something that you can have confirmation bias with. So this was very fun to mess with, just being able to plug that in and unplug it and immediately hearing the difference. So what does the capacitor pack do? Well, it does a number of things, starting off with the sound. What it does for the sound is it creates a more enveloping sound stage. Everything has more depth and weight to the imaging. So it helps the speakers disappear more, and it makes all of the gear disappear more than before. Like I said, it's really hard to describe some of these things because it's truly an experience, and even if I were to record it here with the phone, or if I had a better microphone, you would only maybe get half to 3/4 of what the actual effect is. But as I said, you can immediately A/B back and forth, and if you're in the area, I would be glad to share that with you and demo it for you. But you can immediately hear, if you have, for instance, an instrument right in front of you, you feel and hear the body really come in to that instrument, and it becomes more three-dimensional and spaced, where it floats more compared to where it might be before a bit constrained within the speakers. It creates that depth and dimensionality that really envelops you in the music and helps that emotional connection even more. I experimented with this quite a bit, but I'll admit I only did it for maybe a day or so, because it didn't take much for me to realize it's better just to leave it plugged in. So that's what it's been. It's been plugged in pretty just consistently, unless someone's asked to hear the difference. It's just that much of a plus in my system, and it's something that, like I said, there's some models that can be upgraded with that. So if you're interested in that, let me know, and I'll let you know if it's possible. So I've talked a lot about the sound. I've talked a lot about some other junk. So let's actually start getting into the technicalities, and let's pop these open and show you what really creates this and what makes a difference in Gilbert Yeung designs, specifically in this C312 and the SP36 capacitor pack upgrade. So here we are with the covers off of everything. This has taken me probably about 10 minutes or so to pull it out of the rack and get the lids off of everything, and as you can see, we are still slowly discharging this 3.6 farads of energy here. It's just absolutely incredible, and we'll probably still be doing that for a while. Let's see how long it takes while I do this video. So one other thing that I had forgotten to mention earlier about the C312, even though despite its fairly large size for a preamplifier, this is only for DC and the circuit. Anything AC is in the external power supply. The only AC within the actual chassis of the preamp is the electrical musical signal being passed through it. So all of the AC is housed within this unit. It also has the built-in soft start circuit to slowly charge up the large capacitance that's built into the preamp itself, and for whatever upgrades that you have, such as the SP capacitor packs. The C312 actually has 2 jacks in the rear for upgrades, though it is recommended that if you have the SP36, you're not going to have as much of an upgrade if you were to get a second one as you would with a first one. Just because there's an upgrade path doesn't mean that that's the first direction you should go. You should look at the entire system. But kind of getting off a topic there. So getting further into the technical aspect, another thing that I love about these is each one of the chassis, no matter what it is for a production run model, it's not aluminum. A lot of new components utilize aluminum chassis. It's not always cheap, especially if you use something like billet aluminum. But the problem with aluminum, even though it does have some EMI, RFI blocking abilities, it's good for heat transfer. The problem is it's still a soft metal, so it's easy to scratch, not as good longevity wise, and it's not as structurally rigid. Each one of these is actually steel. These are all steel chassis, so really nice, thick, sturdy. It's not going to resonate as much as aluminum might, and it also has better EMI and RFI capabilities, and steel can actually help wick away any type of magnetic flux as well. For instance, in the power transformers here, it's going to help pull that noise away. So any noise generated or in the AC is going to stick here within this chassis and just be pulled off to ground. It's not going to make its way into the preamplifier where it will be turned into or amplified into your system. A lot of performance just has to do with the noise floor. If you have a higher noise floor, it doesn't matter how refined or how much detail something can pull out of it. If you have more noise, that's going to, you're not going to hear it. So it's really important and critical how you actually run the power and run your signal so that you don't pick up noise. Lower noise is one of the biggest components of a well-performing audio component. So, of course, an external power supply is going to help with that. Everything from Gilbert Yeung has a really nice braided power cable. This is the SP jack. Well, this is the SP jack on the end of the power supply. I'll show the other side here in a second. But here is the actual SP as well. So same plug, but everything is actually labeled in the back where you should plug things in. So going further, let's go ahead and take a look at the interior, and I'll show you some of the build quality and some of the differences that you will not see in modern mass-produced audio and what really helps set these components apart from everything else. Here we are on the back panel. Starting off on the right side here are all of your inputs. So these are your single-ended, and each one is appropriately marked as well. So these correlate to your front panel switches. And then here are your balanced inputs. So your balanced are also a single-ended combo unit. So if all of your units or all your sources are single-ended, no worries, because you have these two extra as well. If you need more inputs or something like that, or even outputs, remember everything from Gilbert Yeung is completely custom, hand-built to order. So if you need something extra, just go ahead and let us know, and that's something that we could accommodate. So coming along here, of course, we have a line out, and then we have our preamp out. We have one balanced and single-ended combo here. And then coming over to the side, we have a ground lift. That's the ground lift. That is grounded. Just more electrical symbols as well. It just means that signal ground is attached to chassis ground or separated from chassis ground. So if you actually have a hum or something when connecting to a source or a power amplifier, you can just lift the ground. As you can see, I actually had it lifted for something I was testing before. It's really easy to know if you have that issue or not, especially if you're using the remote control. If you hit the positive to turn the volume up, if you hear a noise, then you have a ground loop issue, and all you have to do, flip your ground switch. Here on the side is the DC power. So we have our connection here for the power supply. That would go straight into DC power. And then if you have the SP capacitor pack upgrade, you would go ahead and plug that in there as well. As you can see, it's been probably about 20 minutes. We still have power to the SP36, and I just restored power to the preamp because of that. But if it was completely discharged, this is what you would do. You would go ahead and connect everything together, turn the unit on. There is no power switch. It is meant to be left on at all times. You go ahead and let this fully charge up, and then you could actually disconnect your SP capacitor pack. You'd have about 5 minutes or so where you could actually plug this back in and hear that effect come back, or take it back out. Your DC power, of course, would stay connected. There's still some ground connections here if you need extra grounds. For instance, if you're running a separate phono stage, since this does not have an integrated. Now, going into the technical aspects of these units, they are definitely completely different than anything that you would see in a normal mass-produced product, and there is reasoning behind it all. So, starting over here with the capacitor pack that is still slowly discharging. 3.6 farads of capacitive energy, very carefully and thoughtfully laid out and built into this chassis. As you can see, everything here is actually supported by silicone. There is no PCBs in the power supply. Everything is complete soldered point-to-point wiring. Now, one thing I want to dispel, there's been a lot of comments I've seen of people saying that this type of layout is dangerous because they see these just open contact points here, and everyone thinks that, oh, you could get electrocuted. Well, one, you shouldn't be inside of it if you don't know what you're doing. Two, this is actually, I believe, safer than most PCBs, because PCBs, depending on how well they're designed, how thick they are, you have some level of movement on them, especially after years. I've noted on quite a few power amplifiers with big filter capacitors that actually starts to sag with the amount of weight and heat that is subjected to over time. Silicone, it will stay in this state for a very long time, for the life of the product. By the time that the silicone needs replaced, you'd probably need to replace the capacitors and have a rebuild done in 20, 30 plus years. This has a little bit of give to it, so it actually allows the capacitors to stay within their rating. If you have a typical clamp type connector over the electrolytic capacitor, as it heats up and has heat cycles where it shrinks or expands, if you have something constricting, that's actually going to change the value of the capacitor. So this allows it to be nice, perfectly supported. There's no movement whatsoever within it, besides the very finite movement, so that it dampens any level of vibration. So you're not going to have any resonance issue within the chassis or the cabinet. As I noted, we do have the steel, but since that is slightly resonant, we have these tables here. So when you actually put that back on here, it mounts directly to this. So once it is on top of it, that plate will not resonate. The entire thing has been thought out, and every component is the same way. So you don't have to worry about buying something else to reduce your risk of resonance or vibration affecting your electrical components. If it's something that should be worried about, it has been considered. I'm sorry. Here we are with the power supply. So again, sources of vibration or noise, such as the power transformers here, have been completely potted in silicone. So any vibration there will just be immediately eaten up there and will not transfer. We have your main filter capacitors for this power supply section here. As you can note, again, nice 14 gauge solid core connections. Any wire that is just kind of hanging has also been supported by the silicone. That way it is not resting on just the solder connection, and that way you do not have any amount of resonance or vibration transferred between components, and it also keeps all of the solder connections right where they need to be, where you're not going to have an issue with one cracking or anything like that. This is built for longevity and quality. So coming to the actual preamp now, as you can see, there is actually some PCBs here. That's not something that you see too much on Gilbert Yeung's design, since everything is completely hand wired and point-to-point soldered, but the PCBs are no different. Every single component here has been hand soldered and placed by Angela Gilbert Yeung. These have not been built by a machine. It's all done by hand. So that also means that you're going to have quality control that no other component is going to have. Because typically an engineer designs it, it's sent off to the production, and then someone's over quality control, and we've all had some sort of component that isn't what we expected or what we liked when it first got home, because maybe it was broken or something wasn't done right. You don't have to worry about that here, because each and every item that Gilbert builds is something that he is extremely passionate about. So you know it's going to be done well and done the right way. So if you note here, the red and blue wires throughout, that is all of your signal wires. Note that they are not bundled or strapped together. This helps with crosstalk, so you don't actually, when you actually bundle all those wires together, you're putting all those fields directly next to each other to where they can interact. If they are built in such a way like this, they are just out in the open air. They are away from any sources of noise. For instance, here on your inputs, this is where you would have the most noise coming in before the amplification stages. Here, of course, is for the balanced inputs, but then we come in here and follow through up to your switches. There's the dual point switch I was talking about. You notice that all of the signal wires are run along the bottom of the chassis. That means they're run across the signal ground plane and the chassis ground. That way any noise does not get picked up. This is the quietest place that you can have those before it starts going into your separate effect channels. So for instance, these are paper and oil caps. The C312 is actually essentially a build-on of what is capable with the C310 preamplifier. This nice big chunk of silicone is another one of the tables. So once the actual chassis top is put on here, this rests on this table and makes sure that the chassis does not resonate. And of course, that is also protecting a lot of the capacitors for the internal capacitance that's already built into this preamplifier. Here's another section of the capacitors. Of course, the paper and oil caps are well potted here. So no vibration or anything is going to affect them. Any of the components that have multiple point connections have been also supported with silicone. And here is the motor for the volume control. As I noted, there are some models you can actually have each one of your effect knobs controlled by motors as well. This is just the unit with the volume control. And note that the signal wires are ran through the center of a wrapped ground going to the star ground here. So same thing, you're creating a circle of the signal ground here, so it does not pick up any external noise and it does not affect anything else around it. And of course, everything in the power supply is the 14 gauge solid core wire. Also note that it is round. It is not 90-degree angles that directly change the molecular structure of the copper. If you bend something into a 90-degree angle, that's it. It's already started to tear and rip the actual metal, which can affect its conductivity and also thermal properties. Everything here is done in a gentle bend or does not have a bend at all. And it's just for that purpose, for the best connection and best conductivity. So I hope that you've enjoyed my video review of the C312 by Gilbert Yeung. As I said, I am going to leave my written review down below that I did a couple months ago. And I just want to say I'm sorry for how long this review has been, but I just have a lot to say about the sound and just the build quality of this whole package as it sits. As I have noted, this is actually what made me want to start working with Angela Gilbert Yeung. When I first had my opportunity to review this, I actually just sat and listened to it for a good 3 months or more before I even popped open the cases, because I've seen some of her work online, some photos, some videos, and it's just another one of those things. It looks nice online, but you don't know until you actually listen to it if it's going to be the same or, you know, if it's a bit of camera effects. I'll say there is no camera effects and everything is better in person than what it even appears online. But as I said, I listened to it for a good 3 months before even popping it open, and it took me a while to even want to pop it open. It was honestly not until the weekend before I had to ship this out to the next reviewer before I popped it open, because I didn't want to peel it away from my system. It made that much of a difference, and I'm really happy to have this back into my system, and would be extremely happy to have anyone listen to it if you wanted to hear a demo. So if you're interested and you're in the area, please let me know, and maybe we can arrange something. Or if you're interested at all, just please be sure to leave me a message or a comment down below. Even if you have any questions, I'd be happy to talk to you about it. Because as I said, I've talked on this for a little while now, more than I even expected, and as you can see, we still have power in the capacitor pack, and I could probably keep talking on this unit until that capacitor pack completely discharges, but I think I'd rather go ahead and put this back together and get it back into my system. So thank you for watching. I hope that you watch what I have coming out next. I have some more updates and other things that I'm working on, including some of the older designs from Gilbert Yeung that I'd love to share with you, including some upgrades that we are doing to them. So for now, my name is Damien from Cork Audio. Thank you for watching.